Valley, Far North, Inland Empire, LA Metro, some folks from the Central Coast. Great. Okay. Well, then let's get started with today's information session. So my name is Kirsten Vega. Um, can you all see the screen, colleagues? Yeah, okay. My name is Kirsten Vega. I'm a program officer with California Humanities, and I'm just here to welcome you to today's Humanities for All Project Grants webinar. This is an online session that lasts for about an hour. It will give you all the information you need about getting ready for the July deadline for the letter of interest stage for the Project Grants program. This slide here will tell you who's on the call today. Alongside me is your program officer and main contact for this grant line, Felicia Kelly, Project and Evaluation Director. Felicia will be walking you through eligibility and guidelines for the program. We're also joined by Brett Connor, our wonderful grants manager, who will give you a technical rundown of the application process. And then we're very pleased to have, and I'm afraid I've awkwardly inserted her into this slide, our Director of Development, Marika Garcia, whose email is mgarcia@calhum.org. Don't know why my slide didn't update. Sorry, Marika. Glad you're here. Oh, here it is. See, I made a beautiful one. I did not delete the terrible one. Okay, this is the California Humanities staff for today. If you have a question, we want to hear from you. Feel free to use the Q&A at any point to put your questions in, but note, we'll take them after each section. So if you've asked something, it's not being addressed, that means we'll address it later on. We're also happy to follow up with people individual after the webinar if your question or your project hasn't been addressed. Watch the chat. There will be links there to our guidelines and FAQs. Yes, we are recording. Yes, we will send you a copy of the session. It will also be on YouTube and on our website. So don't worry if you have to step out or would like to share this with colleagues. That's great. It will be possible. Okay, since some of you are new to California Humanities, let me just introduce us a little bit. California Humanities is the state partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. We were founded back in the 70s to serve as our state's Humanities Council. The way we serve the humanities is through a few modes. Number one is grant making. We've offered over $30 million in grants in the humanities in the last 40 plus years of our operation. And we also do our own public programming, including reading programs for veterans and medical facilities in California to connect them with the humanities. We fund documentary films and podcasts in the media sector. We fund civic education for middle school students. We also have a program called Library Innovation Lab that helps public librarians better connect with their immigrant communities. So there are many strains through which we support the public humanities in California, but today our goal is to talk with you about one of our grant programs, Project Grants. You'll be hearing an overview in just a few minutes, and then Brett will walk you through the application process. Then Marika and I will give some insights into the review and award process, giving you tips for how to craft a really strong letter of interest that will get the attention of reviewers. And then we'll conclude and give you contact information for how to receive some coaching going forward and get your questions answered as you move through the application process. Okay, well, again, please do put your questions in the Q&A for us. I'll step off screen now and let my colleague Felicia introduce you to Project Grants.
Okay. Thanks so much, Kirsten, and welcome everybody again. We're so glad you can join us and really gratified by your interest in this program. Yeah, as Kirsten alluded to, one of our primary activities at California Humanities, of course, is grant making. And this particular grant program has been around since 2016. We've now made 170 awards, totaling almost $3 million to support wonderful humanities projects in every part of the state. These projects have reached rural and remote communities as well as major urban areas. Many of the projects and the people who have made them succeed have garnered recognition and awards of various kinds. Many of the projects have gone on to have extended lifespans through different types of project extensions, whether it's a traveling exhibit, a website, further, expansion of public programming. So we really do encourage you to take a look at the list of funded projects available on our website. That will give you a great kind of perspective on the overall kind of funding landscape, the types of projects that we've been supporting, and may give you some interesting ideas about what you might think about doing. Okay, next slide. Let's go to this. Okay, before we dig into the specifics about project grants, just want to call your attention to the fact that this Humanities for All kind of initiative really has two tracks or two mechanisms. One is the Quick Grant program. The other is this project grant program. So quick grants, the application process is much simpler. We're now accepting applications on a kind of revolving basis. You can submit an application anytime. You'll be notified within, I believe it's a 6 to 8 week window. These grants support shorter term, kind of smaller scale projects. The grant period is 1 year maximum. That means you need to complete your programming supported with grant funds within a year's time after award. We can provide up to $5,000 in grant funds. There are no matching funds required. And something that's new here is that these are really focused on supporting smaller organizations. So the applicant organization, not the project, but the applicant organization's budget should be capped at no more than $500,000 annually. Okay, so be sure to take a look at the quick grants. But today we're going to focus on project grants, and these awards support longer term projects. You can have up to 2 years to complete your funded project activities. Grants range from $10,000 to $25,000. These grants do require cost sharing on your part. So we look for at least a minimum 1-to-1 match of grant funds over the life of the project. And we'll talk more about this in detail later. These project grants do require that you have a humanities advisor on board, somebody who is going to assist the project director, the project team, be part of the project team throughout the life of the project. We have two rounds a year. The next deadline is coming up in July, and this is super important. If you're familiar with this grant program from the past, you've applied previously, or you've looked at the guidelines, please be aware that our process has changed for this round. We're now moving to a two-step process, which will involve first a very short letter of intent, a much simpler application form. Those letters of intent will be reviewed, and a selected group of applicants will be invited to apply for a full proposal later on in the summer. So we'll go over all of that in great detail, but just please be aware of that going forward, to be sure to read the guidelines and follow the directions. Okay, so what do project grants do? These are grants that provide support to locally initiated. That means projects coming from emanating from California communities and cultural and other types of organizations in those communities that will provide lifelong learning opportunities to Californians, employ the humanities to promote understanding, empathy, increase knowledge and insight in keeping with our organizational mission. We're looking for projects that respond to the needs, show responsiveness to the needs of California communities and their interests and circumstances. Projects should engage new and underserved audiences or constituencies, either in whole or part. And of course, we're looking for projects that increase access to the humanities for everyone by minimizing barriers to participation through things like attention to reducing costs, careful scheduling, program formats, use of multiple languages, etc. Uh, you know, attention to reducing barriers to people who might have disabilities of many types. So make sure that your project pays attention to those priorities. Okay. What kinds of activities do project grants support? So here's a kind of short list of frequently used formats, what we call programming formats. So everything from community conversations, forums, panel discussions, interpretive exhibits. They could be either temporary, permanent, or traveling. Lectures, presentations, demonstrations, and performances that provide opportunities for audience participation and engagement, of course. Things like community-wide reads, cultural festivals, film and discussion programs, film festivals with strong humanities content, as well as other types of programs such as oral history projects, memoir or other nonfiction narrative development, or media making projects that involve community members in sharing stories and knowledge. So not professional media products, but things that are really community participatory kinds of activities. We also support place or site-based interpretive programming. This could be installations, walking tours, the production of a community mural, as long as there are strong public humanities programming elements attached to any art production activities. And finally, music, dance, or dramatic arts performances and presentations that also provide contextualization and engage the public through conversation, dialogue, or discussion. So again, be sure that you look at the list of funded projects on our webpage for ideas and inspiration here. Okay, again, just quickly, some things to keep in mind as you're thinking about developing your project. The primary target public audience should be out of school and in California. That's not to say that you can't do activities that take place, with students or in school time, but every project that we support through this grant line should have a very strong public-facing focus. Okay, this is not designed to support classroom-based instruction. The Youth Voices track does support projects that have a special emphasis on engaging teens through the public humanities. Again, though, these projects should have a very strong out-of-school emphasis as well. Participatory and interactive activities and experiences are especially encouraged. As I said before, all projects should involve a humanities advisor with relevant experience. And if you have questions about who's eligible to serve as a humanities advisor, we encourage you to consult the FAQs or to contact us, and we'll help you work that through. And grant funds should be only used for project-related activities. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, the next slide, want to share with you just one example, one out of that 170 that we mentioned before, funded projects to date. This is kind of an exemplary project. So the Circa Queer History Festival was a very successful project that took place last fall. here in Los Angeles, and it was sponsored by the One Archives Foundation, which is actually the oldest LGBTQ plus organization in the United States. And they did this project to commemorate their 70th anniversary and really to provide kind of a humanities counterpart to the Pride celebrations that are going on right now in many parts of the state, that would really provide a deeper, richer kind of humanities-based look at the experience of LGBTQ communities and their history. So this project actually grew over the course of their planning to engage over 30 partner organizations. And together with those partners, One Archives was able to offer over 70 discrete activities and programs compressed during a 1 month in period in October of last year to coincide with national celebration of LGBTQ History Month in October. So over 4,000 people participated either in live programming or virtually. Thousands more have been able to access the recordings or take advantage of the resources that were developed and archived on the project's website during the course of this work. And the project was so successful that they're planning to continue to offer it, and in fact are right now in the midst of planning a repeat event this fall. So stay tuned for more information about that. But this just kind of shows you how a project can grow and take on life and, even lead to the extension or expansion of activities into the future. And of course, we hope that for every project and hope that some of the work that you all are currently starting to plan will help do that. Okay, thanks.
All right, a couple things about eligibility. Who can apply? So first of all, eligible organizations are California-based nonprofits, also tribal governments, any local or state government entities, educational institutes, libraries, museums, all those kinds of agencies that are either 501c3 nonprofit or are part of municipal government, part of a city, part of a county. Only one organization or organizations can only submit one application, and also each project director can only submit one application. Applicants should not have an active grant with us already, nor should they have a pending application submitted already, only one at a time. And for recent grantees of our Humanities for All programs, we do ask that applicants wait 1 year from submitting a final report from their previous grant before applying again to this Humanities for All project grant. And projects who don't have 501c3 status. Maybe you are a grassroots nonprofit that is not federally recognized. Maybe you are an individual culture programmer, an individual artist. Those folks would need to use a fiscal sponsor as their applicant. So they would need to find a 501c3 nonprofit organization to apply on their behalf. Now, some examples of things we don't support. We don't support general operations. We don't support capital improvements. We want to make sure these funds actually go to public-facing humanities programming. We don't fund research or planning, the production of artistic or scholarly work. We do not fund, on this particular grant line, documentary media research and production. If you're interested in that, we have a whole grant line just for documentaries. It's not this one. Professional development, scholarships, fellowships, residencies, and anything to do with advocacy and on activism. Also, Felicia did already mention, in school, in-class instruction, curriculum enhancement, classroom-based, these projects need to be public-facing. So there's this list here. There's also a list in the guidelines and in the FAQs. So the funding and the use of funds. So you can request anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000. And whatever you request, those funds must be matched by a 1-to-1 ratio or 100% matching with cash or in-kind contributions from non-federal sources. So for instance, if you have an NEH grant or an NEA grant, that's federal funds. You can't use that to count for a match for our grant program. All right. You don't have to have those matching funds in place when you apply. Do your best estimate of where you're going to get that funding. We just need to see that, say you're granted, and at the time of the final report, we'll ask that you show us where that 100% match has come from. So this grant period that you may be applying for right now, the grant period will take place for 2 years, starting January of 2025 and ending December 2026. A common question people ask is, what's the payout schedule? You receive the first 50% of the award on our receipt of the executed grant agreement. You get 40% at the midway point after you've turned in an interim report, and then you get the final 10% at the end after you've turned in your final report. All right, so of course, this is a competitive grant program. On about average, we fund about 10% of the applications that come into us. We are going to talk about the selection criteria and the merit and the capacity a little bit later on in this presentations. And of course, unsuccessful past applicants may reapply. So if you are awarded, what are your obligations? So you do have to perform the activities that you have described in the proposal. You do have to be compliant with the terms in the grant agreement, especially regarding publicity, acknowledgement of our funding, and requesting any modifications to your proposal and your budget. Like I just mentioned, there is an interim report and there is a final report through that 2-year grant period. All right, so now we're going to take a little bit of a question break, and Kirsten, I'm just going to ask you while we're doing that. I'm unable to put things in the chat box because I can only chat to panelists for some reason. So I'm not sure if Kirsten, that's something that you can work on, because I do have some things I'd like to put in the chat. So let's see. I know we have some questions in the Q&A box. And the first couple I was going to go towards is, there was a couple right off the bat about the humanities advisors. So a couple questions about what's the level of involvement expected from a humanities advisor, and what should the qualifications of an advisor be?
Brett, let me just say I made you co-host, so let me know if you have any further problems.
Okay, yeah. So with project grants, we do want you to work with a humanities advisor. For those of you who are already humanities professionals, either academics or practicing, museum curators, journalists, filmmakers, etc., we still want you to bring somebody else on board on your team to kind of be a sounding board, to help inform the project, to bring another perspective to bear. So yes, even if you are a humanities professional or expert, you should bring on somebody else to fulfill that role, the humanities advisor. And humanities advisor should be somebody who's expert and who can contribute to your project, contribute their skills or knowledge, their insights as a humanities expert. So they could be a scholar who's knowledgeable about the particular field that your project addresses. Obviously, depending on your project, that will vary enormously. They could also be somebody who has specialized skill set like oral history or documentary filmmaking, or museum curatorial skills, if that's, something that's, again, relevant to your project. They could be a community culture bearer, somebody who may not have formal academic training, but who is really considered by the relevant community or the community that your project is focused on, as a person who, kind of is a bearer of wisdom, knowledge, and cultural heritage and traditions. And so again, we're really looking for you to involve somebody who can contribute to enriching your project, making the humanities content stronger in order to provide a more meaningful, rich, and valuable experience to your public. So if you have specific questions about it, I'd advise you to just email me and we can, chat over email or even have a conversation and see how we can clarify that.
All right, so keep your questions coming. There's like 100 of you, so it's going to be impossible for us to answer every single question. But those of us who are not speaking at the time are trying to go through that question list as fast as we can. We're going to save important ones for these some question breaks later on, and some easy ones. We'll just type out answers for you. So please be patient. Don't get frustrated if we haven't gotten to you yet. There's plenty of us in there to do. Let's do one or two more questions. Let's talk about what does cash versus in kind mean, and what are different ways to meet that requirement?
Okay, again, by the end of the grant period, so not now, not when you're applying, but by the end of the grant period, we expect you to show that you have matched at a minimum 1-to-1 ratio the funds that we're providing to you through this grant. Okay, so if you're requesting $25,000, your total budget should be at least $50,000. It can be more than that, but at a minimum, it should be $50,000. And to meet that matching requirement, you can use cash on hand. If your organization has funds that you can apply towards the project, that's great. If you need to do fundraising to raise additional cash, you can do that. You just need to have kind of an idea about where you're going to be getting those funds. If you're going to be using resources either contributed by your organization or community partners, that could be anything from a venue for programming to the use of equipment to providing, expert consulting. All of those resources, are worth something. They have a market value. So what you would do is calculate the value that you would have, the monetary value of those resources, and you would include that in your budget as part of your in-kind. Okay, now I just want to point out that for this new process, this LOI process, we do not require you to have your budget in place at the time that you apply. If you are invited to proceed to the final stage, yes, you will have to fill out a budget form, and we will provide detailed information. Actually, we do provide detailed information already about that on the portal. So if you're curious about that, take a look at what will be required of full applicants. But right now, at this LOA stage, you do not have to worry about putting together a budget.
All right, let's take a pause there. Keep your questions coming. Like I said, we'll answer as many as we possibly can. So now I'm going to kind of talk you through some mechanics here. So I think we start with the timeline, right, Kirsten? So this is kind of the timetable of what this grant cycle looks like. The letter of intent is available right now. You can work on that. Today is our webinar. Those letters of intent are due 5 p.m. July 15th. don't wait till July 15th. You can get it done and submit it today. We've already had a couple submitted, if you can believe that. We will take July and August to review those LOIs. And then by the end of August, we will have reviewed all of those letters of intent, and we will email decisions to all applicants. So those that are invited will attend an information session in September, and those invited folks will need to submit the full application by October 15th. Then we will go into our second review phase, and then we will announce our decisions in December of this year. Again, this is just a little snapshot of the project grant website on our homepage on calhum.org. It's just kind of showing you some of these same details I just said at the top with the timeline as well. At the bottom, there's where the links live for links to the guidelines document, for the FAQs, a sample letter of intent to see what it looks like. And also there's a link there of recently supported grants. So you can always access our application, our grant portal, by going to our homepage, calhum.org, and in the banner at the top, you will see the link for the grant portal. Once you get into the grant, once you get that link, if you have applied with us before, whether it's project grants or a totally different grant, if you've applied with us before, use that same username and password, your email and password that you used the last time. If you have not applied with us before, hit that register button to create a login. Once you're logged in, hit programs at the very top, and that will give you a menu of all the different grant offerings that we have at California Humanities. Today, of course, we're talking about project grants. So you will select the link for project grants, and then you will see your apply button. Once inside the application, in the middle of your screen there, you will see these little circles with tasks next to them. You can see in this example, those green circles are halfway filled in, meaning that the user in this case has started to work on those, but they aren't finished yet. The green circle isn't completely filled in. So depending on what your situation is, depending on whether you're just doing the LOI, whether you're 4 months down the road and you're doing the full application, whether you are using a fiscal sponsor or not, the number of tasks that appear in that screen will differ from user to user. But rest assured, you do have to complete all of the tasks in that center portion. All right, we can move forward. The form is just a regular old web form that has fill in the blanks and drop down boxes, radio buttons, check boxes. And then the other thing that I want to call your attention to on this slide is at the end of every task that you complete as part of this application, you will see that green mark as complete button. So make sure that you hit that green mark as complete, and that solidifies that you have finished that one task. Now that doesn't submit your application. That just finalizes the one task of the application packet. And you can see how that looks after we hit the mark as complete button. You see those the green circles filled in and the check boxes there. So in this example, there's a required reading task, an eligibility quiz. Those have been completed. And then the ones below it, application form, narrative, budget, etc., are not finished yet. Just in this example. The other thing I want to point out on this screen is that orange circle that says add collaborator. So if you need someone, whether it's at your sponsor organization, maybe it's your authorizing official because they'll need to sign at the end. Maybe it's just someone in accounting who has your tax ID or things like that. You can use that add collaborator button to invite another user in to help you with your application, whether that's filling out the form or filling out the narrative or whatever part that is. It's basically a way to give access to someone else to help you complete your application. So this is what it looks like when you're done. All of the tasks are turned green, and therefore the green submit button has lit up as well. if you want to get a download, this is a common question, which is why I include this slide, that yellow circle that says preview, if you want a download of the copy of the contents just for yourself, that is the best place for you to get your own copy. Go to that preview button and you can download contents of everything for yourself. And then of course, hit that submit when you're done. A common question people ask is, I've completed a task, but I need to go back and edit it, okay? And that button is kind of hard to find. So you click on the task that you want to edit, and then in the top left corner, there's an ellipsis. There's those three little dots. When you hit that submenu, you will get edit, download, and reset. So that's where your edit button will be. All right, again, when you're done, and that green light comes on, go ahead and submit. Now, I'm going to invite Felicia to come back and talk about what is the core of this application. Really are some narrative prompts around the letter of intent. So I'm going to ask Felicia to cover those.
Okay, thanks, Fred. Yeah, so with the letter of intent process, we have come up with 5 topical areas. They're listed on the form, and we've given you, or encouraging you to keep your responses very short. There's a 250 word limit that's kind of built into the form, so you're going to have to be succinct. We encourage you to give this a lot of thought, of course, and you probably will want to compose your responses offline, a document, write out your thoughts, and then if you want, you can cut and paste them into the online form, or if you prefer to work online, you can do that and save your work as you go along. You don't need to repeat the prompts in your responses, of course, then that will save a lot of space. Okay, so let's go to the first prompt here, or the first section of the LOI, and this should be where you provide us with a description, capsule description of your project. So again, 250 words, you're going to have to really condense this down, but we would like to have a high-level description, overview of the public humanities project that you plan to conduct with support from grant funds. So as part of that, you want to describe the key activities that you'll be accomplishing during the course of the grant period, when and where your project will take place, and the individuals and organizations that will play key roles in planning and implementing it. So again, here you're just providing, very high level, kind of a 30,000 foot level perspective on your project. We also want you to tell us, because this is super important, of course, is who your project will engage as core participants and audiences. So for example, if you're working with students, you're going to be working with students who are going to be conducting oral histories or doing some kind of work on the project. You can talk about that there, but you also want to talk about who the ultimate audiences are for this project, the broader community members who this project will touch and be of benefit to. You can also sketch out, a little bit about the anticipated outcomes, impacts that you think this project will have. How is it going to produce benefits for the public, for the communities, the people that you want to reach? And if you're anticipating producing any tangible products, things like an exhibit or, a series of podcasts or a website, or, materials for a self-guided or docent-led neighborhood or community walking tour. Anything that you anticipate producing of that nature, you can describe here too. Okay, so the next section of the LOI is the project rationale. So the why question, this is where you want to answer, why is it important to do this project? Okay, what is the need for this project and how have you determined that need? Okay, do you have a community advisory group that's helping you plan the project? Has the need for this project bubbled up out of past, program evaluations that you've done? Has the community that you work with expressed a strong desire or need for this kind of a project? Where is this coming from? Right? We want to know that. We want to, as kind of a counterpart to that, how do you know that the project that you're planning to do will actually be of interest to the people that you want to enrich and engage through it? Okay. How do you know that? So, again, encourage you to give this a lot of thought and to reflect on past work that you've done, as well as, really, really think about how you would assess community need and interest more broadly. And finally here, as we want these projects to obviously relate to our mission, you want to give some thought to thinking this through and telling us how you think your project will relate to our goals to connect Californians to ideas and one another in order to understand our shared heritage, diverse cultures, inspire civic participation, and shape our future. Okay. So, because we are a humanities organization, we're very interested in supporting work that uses the humanities to accomplish the goals and our missions. So, tell us how your project intersects with the humanities. How does your project make use of humanities methods and knowledge? Is it based in, will it be based in understanding of community history, culture, exploring cultural traditions, anything of that nature? What kinds of humanities learning experiences and opportunities will it provide to participants and audiences? So, will your project present knowledge to the public through the means of an exhibit or short documentary films, or creating a mural that explores community history and culture, that involves the community and dialogue and learning? Just be sure to think about that and provide a kind of broad strokes overview of that. And then finally, yes, how do you envision working with a humanities advisor to deepen and enrich the humanities content of your project? So what role will your humanities advisor play? Will they be primarily providing insight about content? Will they be helping you, employ humanities methods, such as, again, oral history or, nonfiction narrative writing, memoir writing, documentary filmmaking, exhibit curating, archival research, or, possibly facilitating a community conversation or dialogue? So there are many different ways that humanities advisors can contribute to your projects. So just be sure to give that some thought and to spell it out here. Um, the fourth section that we'd like you to write to is really having a very clear sense from the get-go about the audiences or audience that your project will engage. So who are you really trying to reach and involve through this project? And because we have a very strong interest in seeing that the projects that we support increase and expand, engagement for the humanities, particularly on the part of historically underserved or underrepresented constituencies. And this will obviously vary on your community, your constituency, who you're trying to reach. But the important thing is that you are very clear about at least one underserved constituency that your project will engage, and how you will undertake appropriate measures to engage that community or that group of folks and mitigate any existing barriers to participation. And the final section here is what we're calling the work plan. And at this stage, again, you do not have to have details in place about outreach, budget, evaluation, even, personnel. You do not have to have that in place, but we do want you to be able to describe, again, at a kind of high level, who's going to be involved in conducting your project, what kinds of skills and resources will you need to implement this project, both human and material. If you have partners in mind, organizations or individuals that you'll be collaborating with to implement your project, plan and implement your project, you can talk about that here. And again, just in a couple of sentences, you want to talk about how you meet our cost sharing requirements and secure that required match and any additional resources that you will need to implement this project by the end of the grant period. Okay. And again, as we said before, what's different about the process this time is we'll be reviewing these LOIs. We'll accept them anytime, but they're due. The final deadline is July 15th. We will not be notifying folks until the end of August. Everybody who applied at that point will receive notification, either thank you, but thank you for thank you for your service, essentially. Those of you who will be invited to submit a full proposal will be notified too. We'll hold an information session for those invitees who were invited to proceed to the next stage of the process early in September. We'll also be providing individualized staff advising. If you are invited, you will need to submit a full proposal that's very much along the lines of the kind of application that we've asked for in the past. So you can take a look at the instructions, sample previously funded proposals, and review all the requirements for the full proposal by visiting the portal. But in a nutshell, it includes an 8-page narrative, a full project budget sheet, an Excel sheet, timeline, and supporting materials, as well as a memorandum of understanding for fiscally sponsored projects that details your agreement with the organization that's going to be fiscally sponsoring your project. Okay.
Okay, Felicia, should we pick it up from here? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So now that you've heard all about the criteria for a strong application, Marika, our Director of Development, and myself just want to give you some tips for preparing a really strong submission that meets that criteria. First of all, I would say take time to read the guidelines, read instructions carefully, provide all information. It can hamper your project if reviewers don't find all of the necessary information in your application. Take take a moment after you've read the instructions and get started as soon as possible. As Brett said, you can edit your application up until the due date, so it's better to start early and come back and revise. You might be surprised by how much time it takes to put together your LOI, though we're hoping it won't be as long as it once was to do an application. Um, let's see. As Brett said, make sure everything is marked as complete. Look for the green submit button and be careful to review and edit. Marika, any advice from someone who writes grants all the time?
Yes, I just, yes, want to underscore that second bullet point, which is to get started as soon as possible. I often find even now that it does take longer than I anticipate to start to write an application or a proposal.
Yeah, absolutely. The key dates to keep in mind are listed here again for your convenience. Letter of interest due July 15th by 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. There is a time bind there. You will hear back from us by the last day of August. If you're invited for the full proposal, those will be due on October 15th, and you'll hear from us by the middle of December 2024. And then that would bring you into your award period of the beginning of January of 2025. Keep that in mind. These dates are also on our website and in the guidelines if you need to revisit them. Okay, now to break down the review criteria. What project grants really want to do in the world is increase the accessibility of the humanities for everyone in California, and particularly for underserved constituencies. Take care that you express the needs of your audience as you detail your project's purpose, its goals, and its outcomes. We also really want to see the depth of humanities content coming through. So take care that you're explaining the contributions of your humanities advisors and the most complex and humanities-based rationale for your project is something reviewers really appreciate reading. As Felicia mentioned, we want to know these projects are coming from community interest. If you can detail past work with your community, conversations, or advisory groups you've met with to determine the need for your project, make your rationale connected to what your community needs, and your LOI will be stronger for it. And as I mentioned, project grants really want to offer low cost and free humanities experiences. So please take time to tell us how you're mitigating barriers to access. If you're offering pay what you can, sliding scale, or free admission, if you're busing in audiences that don't have transportation access to your site, if you're using a public site like a library where the barriers to entry are very low, these are really good things to mention. Marika, anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to add, I know Felicia highlighted a project award earlier, and then Brett also placed a link to previous grantees and awarded projects. And I just really want to emphasize it's a great resource to kind of read through those projects and see how different grantees have applied, these concepts into their projects.
Absolutely. And you can also check out the California Humanities calendar of events. Check out some events in your area if you're able to. There are a lot of project granted funded events happening all around California every week. If you can, go to an exhibit or a public program and you'll get a sense of the kinds of work that gets funded through these grants. Okay, capacity is an important part of review criteria. Take care with your project team bios. I've read applications that didn't spend time explaining the qualifications, background, and contributions of their project team. Unfortunately, these applications can be weaker in a pool that does take care to do this kind of writing. So detail who your team is. It will be it'll be easier to do this in the full application, but do make use of that project team description. Your timeline, make sure you're allowing reasonable time to complete your steps. Make sure that your budget matches up with your application. This is really your whole grant story. The story of your budget and the story of your application or LOI should complement each other. And do think about your partners and collaborators and make sure that they are the appropriate ones to be bringing subject matter expertise to your themes. Marika, anything to add on capacity?
I don't have anything much to add. Just being mindful of your capacity and being realistic is key because reviewers are looking at that and making note of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we are really excited about the projects you've been describing in the Q&A today. It sounds like there are a lot of really interesting and rich humanities projects percolating on this call. So thank you for telling us more about what you're working on. We're really looking forward to reading your LOIs in the coming year. Just keep in mind that to tell, the brightest and strongest version of your grant story, Make the humanities central to your project. Be realistic in your line while being ambitious about your reach in the public life. Make sure to come back time and time again to your audience. Who are they? How are you serving them? And how do you know that they want to be interested in this project? And continue to make your goals feasible. That will make your proposal stand out. And at the full proposal step, all of these things will apply alongside thoroughness, completeness, and consistency. As I said, your narrative should support your timeline, your budget, etc. Marika, any words to the wise?
No, this is a great list. Just a reminder to check the chat for some great resources and links to our website, including signing up for our newsletter, which also lists events every month and some of projects that we've awarded.
Definitely. That is a good step. Do sign up for the e-news, and we will stick around for a few more minutes of questions. But for those of you who have to jump off, here are the contacts you'll need. If you have any questions about your project eligibility, don't hesitate to send Felicia a note. If you're wondering about something technical, like whether your fiscal sponsor or university can, submit a second application, Brett is a good go-to. And if you want to know about our other grant programs, we have a full matrix on our website at calhum.org/funding opportunities. And here again is the link to sign up for the e-news. I want to thank my colleagues so much for their time leading this information session today, and thank you all for your interest in this program. We really look forward to hearing from you. Okay, a few more questions.
Sure. Let's talk about match. Can match come from city government?
Yes, absolutely. The only sources of funding that aren't eligible to be used for match are federal funds.
Right. How about what is a large scale project?
Yeah, that's really language I think we should take out of this in the future, because it's it's pretty meaningless. I mean, this, generally speaking, we're looking for projects that will engage a good number of people, or show potential for expanded reach or engagement even after the grant period. So if your project is very intensive and involves a small number of people, or if you're based in a rural community or a small community, where not many people live, yeah, those are all important factors to take into account. Generally, we like to see an audience of at least 500 people over the life of the grant period for project activities, but that's not a hard and fast rule. So, what's more important are kind of the holistic elements of your project. Is it providing deep and rich and meaningful humanities experiences to the target audience? Are you engaging, new and underserved constituencies? Or, is it really something that the community needs and wants? And can you justify the investment of public funds in this project in order to do it? That's those are the kinds of things that we're looking for when we evaluate these projects, not exact target numbers about audiences, or the number of events or anything of that nature.
And just to riff off of that point, seeing Olivia in the Q&A saying almost 500 would be almost impossible for a small institution. To clarify, we're saying around 500 over the life of the project. Over 2 years, would you have 500 people walk through your exhibit or attend your program? So think about it that way. 10 people at a bunch of programs over 2 years could get you to that number. And not to be strict about the number, but just sort of as a sense of the size of the audience you anticipate being interested in and benefiting from your project.
Thanks. Laura is asking, their first proposal isn't accepted. Do we need to submit another LOI the next time? And the answer is yes. And then let's see, an example of programming, would digitizing an archive of a community elder in a collective process and having objects come out of that, such as zines, microdocs, etc., be eligible?
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. I'd say the only thing that might be missing from that are actual public engagement activities. So it's wonderful to produce these products, yes, but we want to see that you're actually holding some events where, people get to talk about them, engage in dialogue about them, maybe a workshop where they learn how to use them. We in addition to producing the product, we want to see that people are actually involved in, experiencing it in some way. So, yes, podcast, community created documentaries, a community created exhibit, all of those are wonderful, but think about how you're actually going to engage people in engaging with these work products.
All right, well, I think that is our time for today. We do have a few extra minutes. I want to let the majority of people go and say this is the end. Thank you for coming. Here's all our contact information. Some of us will stay around just a few more minutes if anybody wants to put any last minute comments or questions into the Q&A box. I'm sorry we can't open the meeting up to voices, but we'll stay on for just a minute for any last minute questions.
And thank you all. We hope to hear from you.
Yeah, this question, Anna, I'm not sure this has to do with this presentation, but Anna's asking, Felicia noted some of the Queer History Festival activities were discrete. What does that mean?
Separate events. Some of these were like an evening lecture or an afternoon film screening and discussion, or a one-off theatrical performance followed by a post-performance
So there are
audience
many
Q&A.
separate events.
Separate events. Yeah. But all under the umbrella of this history festival.
Let's see, Christina's asking, my project involves a mini documentary and podcast audio production, as well as events and community engagement. Should I apply for this or for a production grant? That one could almost go both ways.
Both ways, yeah. I would say in part it depends on the budget. If the budget is primarily geared towards production, then you might want to take a look at CDP. If it's more slanted towards the community engagement, then maybe look at Humanities for All. But look at both.
Rhonda, yeah, I'm not sure what your question is. So just if it's about your oral histories and making a documentary, I would just email Felicia directly about that. Nancy, I'm not sure I understand your question. So let's cap it right there and call it a day. And please reach out to us via email if there's any outstanding questions. Thanks all.